All right, so tonight in our podcast here, we have with us Mr. Dr. Professor Smedley Bowe and the Grand Televisor, Jared Askin. And tonight we're going to be discussing the history of radio and television studios at Northern Highlands. Now, Mr. Dr. Professor, would you like to start us off?
Okay, I am here to present my side as a radio expert on how it was the problems to get a radio studio into the school that prevented us from having it all these years.
All right, Mr. Grand Televisor, your opening statement.
Okay, I would like to state that we have had television always here, and that's because television is the important medium where radio is not really important to the growth of the students. So it's really been unnecessary to have it, and that's why we really truly have never had a successful radio here.
All right then. So, coming up to that point where Mr. Askin stated that radio has never been popular enough to actually succeed here, can you tell us about the interest level that has been throughout Highlands history for radio?
Well, there has been an interest in radio since the school's founding. Originally, we did have music every lunch period by students broadcast over the PA system. We were never able to obtain a license, and that's why we never moved on to a full radio station back in the day. But back in 2001, a license was obtained by Mr. Bernice in the science department, and however, he was not able to form a club because he couldn't get enough people. There was another club formed for an internet radio service by Mr. Gornell, which was successful and ran for 5 years after he founded it. So, in culmination of those facts, I'd like to say that there was always an interest for radio at our school, and that there is still an interest today.
All right. Yes, very, very valid point there. And Jared?
Well, yes, there's always been an interest in radio here, but with Mr. Dr. Professor Smedley Bowe's point of the 2001, there was not enough interest in order to be able to use that license that was obtained. I believe there was only one thing ever done with that license, and it had never been used since until its expiration in 2011. And with the internet radio, yes, there was a following, but it was not enough for the budget cuts to hold on to it, whereas the television has been constant throughout the history of our school, with the formation culminating with that studio off of the library, the studio in the building when the expansion came in the 70s, and the current television studio that we have today.
All right. So,
I'd like to state that although we did have the license, we did not have the equipment to have a full-scale radio broadcast center, and that's what hampered the interest for that club. The club that Mr. Gornell founded was an internet radio service, and they did have the equipment they needed to have the station. And because they had the equipment, they garnered enough interest to have a club.
So you're telling me that it was lack of equipment and not interest that prevented radio from being here?
Because we've had the equipment for television, that's why they had the interest. We don't have the equipment for radio.
Well, I feel like if there was an interest in having radio at this school, you would hear about students complaining that there is no radio, where you do not hear students even mentioning the idea of having a radio station here.
but would it be the same if there was just if the roles of TV and radio had been switched to Highlands? Would you hear the same thing about there being a lack of a television studio instead of radio?
In the age of YouTube, I believe there would be.
And prior to that?
The age of America's Home Video, Funniest Videos, yes, I do believe there would be an interest in being able to film things.
All right, a valid point there. I'll give you that. Mr. Dr. Professor, do you have anything to say about this, or should we move on? All right, so also, Mr. Dr. Professor, I believe that when in the original plans for the school, there was supposed to be a community radio that would have been broadcasted out to the 4 towns in the Sunday districts of Highlands. Can you tell us a bit about that or at all?
Yes.
Or any community outreach in general?
In our research, there was community outreach by the teachers in the time that were trying to found a radio station. However, the people on the board did not give the school enough funding to form a full radio station, and that's why it didn't happen, as well as the lack of the license that they could achieve.
Well, you may not have had community outreach with your radio, but there has been community outreach with the film, because there's the Highlands Oscars night, which is open to the entire community to showcase all of the films created in the television production classes, and many of the television production class students choose to post their videos to YouTube.
All right, and Mr. Askin, can you tell us how well attended these TVP Oscars are, or how many views their YouTube videos get?
Well, I know that friends of the TVP students will attend the TVP Oscars, and some other interested students. It's not the most attended event of the school year, but it does get a turnout. As for YouTube videos, I feel like they get a bit more publication and knowledge of, and that's because people will post them on social media accounts and stuff like that, and they get their videos out there if they want.
Okay, yes, that makes sense. Makes sense. And then, Mr. Dr. Professor, do you have anything else to state, or should we just continue on here?
I'd like to state that there was community outreach for radio in terms of the internet radio service that did have a following. However, there would have been more of an outreach if it was a broadcast radio station, but that could not be brought up because the need to purchase and set up a full operating station.
All right, so just another point I want to bring up here. It seems that 99% of the students know about TVP and the TV studios here, but a very, very slim percentage of students know about the radio station, or the fact that we had a radio station. So, Mr. Askin, would you want to talk about that?
Well,
How most students know the TV?
the TVP is a class that's offered here, and the radio station has the radio room, the room where the radio station was originally planned to be put, has now been turned into an IT server room, I guess you could say. And I mean, that's justly so. That has more practical uses in today's culture, and we need the stronger use of the IT department because of the fact that the school is going to a bring your own devices to school system next year. So we need the IT strength, and we don't need the radio. So the fact that the original radio room has been turned into an IT room is beneficial to the school, where the radio system would not be beneficial.
Then Mr. Dr. Professor, do you have any counters to his points or new points you'd like to make of your own?
I'd like to say that the students don't remember the radio station because all markers that we would have to remember it have been eliminated by the school. For example, the door on front of the server room is now completely scraped off what used to have a big sign saying radio room on it. And this is in contrast to what we like to remember, like the TV studios, which in the map wing there's a clearly marked door saying TV control room. We chose as a school to keep that because we consider it a success. We don't choose to keep the radio sign up because we don't want to acknowledge the failure of the radio.
Well, I don't think the failure needs to be acknowledged because, I mean, radio is not an important medium for today, and because it's early last century, it's turn of the 19th to 20th century, and we are now the 21st century, and we don't need radio. It's only real use today is in cars, and I mean, that is becoming obsolete with the introduction of auxiliary cables and MP3 players being able to be played directly into your car.
Okay, your argument that it is becoming obsolete as a form of communication could be countered by the point that we keep a newspaper in our school. That is one of the oldest forms of mass media communication, and that is one of the thriving aspects and proud aspects of our school.
Well, that being said, I feel like the reason that we have a newspaper in the school still is because we're expected to, and that's tradition. High schools traditionally have a school newspaper, and it's something that you're supposed to be proud of, and it's something that you're supposed to have, and there's supposed to be a following, and people are meant to get their information that way. It's one of the few ways for the student body to communicate directly to the student body on a massive scale. Now, radios are not expected to be in schools, so Highlands doesn't feel obligated to have it, so we don't have it, and therefore it's not as important.
Okay, well, however, you were saying that radios are not expected in schools and that there is not many schools that have it. There is a whole association founded for this, the American Radio Relay League, that watches over and gives licenses out to high school radio stations. In fact, there's even high school radio stations in our area. IHA has had a radio station for over 10 years, long enough that Mr. Bernice had come from there and had been the operator of that radio station. That station is so successful that it has actually spun off and has 2 stations there.
Yeah, well, also, just a point I'd like to make here about the American Radio Relay League. I believe that they also held high school competitions for high school radio clubs. This is
Yes, it's true. Yes, Mr. Bernice even tried to have one of these at our school, and he finished it and just did not submit the results to the American Radio Relay League for the license.
So, yes, there is a following for radios in high schools, but clearly they're not important enough for the ARRL to be a well-known organization because students at Northern Highlands don't know it exists. Students probably all over the country don't know it exists, where people know about sports leagues, people know about club leagues, they know about things like Quidditch today. They don't know about the ARRL, so clearly it is not a large organization, so not that many schools have radio systems.
But schools have had radio stations, and our school could have had a radio station. We had the license, we just did not have the funding to get it started. There was interest there. With the internet radio station and Mr. Gornell's club, they showed clear interest for radio. But due to the legal red tape of not attaining a license for so long, and due to the lack of facilities of not having an actual radio station, there's a lack of knowledge about the radio. And that lack of knowledge goes to the lack of knowledge of all the students about the radio station. And the fact that the TVP wing has all the funding it needs to function, and all the facilities, the clearly marked facilities, that leads to the greater remembrance of it and the greater prevalence of it in the minds of the student body.
Well, you said earlier that they had a broadcast music over the PA system, and I would just like to comment on that, saying if we were broadcasting things throughout the school, why didn't that continue? Why did we cease audio broadcast? We originally had a closed circuit television system, but with the addition, that was no longer able to be continued. But today we have a video 3 times a week that is broadcast throughout the school, and it shows news, and it gives information to students.
Yes, but back to your closed circuit television argument, that got shut down with the PA system. but they got brought back only when we got the projectors and the screens in our classrooms needed to broadcast new television stations. So once the facilities were there, we were able to garner interest for it.
But there has always been a PA box in every classroom. So, and in the lunchroom and speakers outdoors, and you said that they were broadcasting things over that. Why do they not? You said they would broadcast music and things like that. Why do they not still do that today?
Oh, there is actually, during the spirit days, music throughout the day in the hallways and in the cafeteria, as well as during their 90-minute lunches. So that is a clear remembrance of the music that was played during lunches in the early days of our school.
All right, so these have been some very interesting points that we've had from both our guests here. And just to wrap this up here, we're coming to a close. Could you summarize both of your whole the arc of both your arguments? Could you summarize that in a quick little few sentence summary, saying why your form of media or your medium is more important than the others?
Well, I would like to say that due to the fact that we have the remembrance of the second television studio still on the door in the math office, that we do value television media and that it is important to the student body to have the ability to learn it because that is a viable career option.
All right, and Mr. Dr. Professor, your closing remarks?
There are many radio broadcasters, and it is a viable career option. However, I'd like to state in my argument that it was the lack of facilities and the legal red tape that led to us not having a radio station. And the lack of the radio station was a failure to the school, and it was erased in the memory of the school by erasing the symbols, like the sign on the door, and erasing the facilities like the PA system that was centrally located. And by doing so, we have erased part of our history of the school, the history of the radio station that never was.
All right. Well, this has certainly been a nice debate here that we've had on our podcast tonight, and I just want to finish up here saying with a thank you to both our guests here, the Grand Televisor Jared Askin and Mr. Dr. Professor Smedley Bowe. So thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.